covering for one of my colleagues, and you'll see some of the rest of my team as the week goes by.
Thanks, Scott. So what we are going to talk about today is two really crucial elements to studying at the University of Glasgow across all subject areas. So as Scott mentioned there, he's a scientist by background. I'm a historian, so I'm an arts and social science person by background. And we're going to talk about academic integrity, so plagiarism, and also talk about the use of AI with academic integrity in mind. Right. And the reason why we've got this as a core session, so the reason why we're prioritizing this so much is academic integrity is really a crucial and central part of successful postgraduate study. So when Stuart, Lucy, and Claire were talking earlier about mastersness, one of the crucial skills to get to grips with is understanding the academic community in which we work, and the academic rules governing academic integrity, academic honesty, and making sure that we don't commit plagiarism. So we're going to talk a little bit today around about why we reference, so what's the purposes of referencing, and the use of academic integrity and good practice around academic integrity. And then we'll talk about integrating references into your writing. So we'll talk about things like citations, writing about evidence and bibliographies. And then Scott's going to talk about how we now do this in light of a variety of artificial intelligence tools that exist. So the ways in which we can ensure that we're maintaining academic integrity while using AI tools, but using AI tools as kind of part of a wider suite of approaches that we might take to ensuring that we maintain academic integrity. Okay. So before we start, I wanted to emphasize really the fact that academic integrity is a central part of everything that we do at university, right? Every part of your work, every submission, every essay, report, dissertation, presentation, all of these types of pieces of work require that we have an approach to our studies and our use of sources and references and information that ensures that the information we're using has transparency to it and also has a source or acknowledgement as to where that information has come from. Right? We require that across all subject areas in all cases whatsoever. We'll talk about what this means in practice, but think about this as one of the fundamental building blocks and foundations of your academic study for the upcoming year. So what I wanted to start with was referencing. Why do we reference? Okay. You'll know that academic writing is slightly different from other forms of writing. Academic texts are slightly different from other forms of texts in that we make use of references throughout the work, right? So that we reference the sources of our information, we reference where our ideas come from, right? This is a crucial building block of academic text and academic writing. Okay. What academics spend their time doing is reading, engaging with texts, engaging with publications, engaging with articles and books, and then using that evidence as the basis for the development of our own ideas. And that's what we expect from our students. Okay, so why do we reference? Well, we reference because it's a crucial part of academic writing, academic texts, but we reference because it does so much more than just avoiding plagiarism in a text. Okay, so why do we reference? Well, we reference firstly for our markers to demonstrate our learning, right? So we're using this as a way of showing to our markers, showing to our examiners, the fact that we have read and understood a text, right? The fact that we are able to understand or use the ideas or the evidence or the information that we have been reading through our courses. Right, so that demonstration of our learning is a crucial part of why we might reference. Okay. So if you think of if I am marking an essay, for example, or a report, one of the things that I'll do is look at the reference list and have a look to see, well, what kind of sources have been used, what kind of evidence is being used, how is this being proven, how do I know that this is true? But then I'm also using that as a way of saying, well, how much have you, as the student, how much have you engaged with the topic, engaged with the texts, engaged with the papers and the ideas? So that demonstration of learning is a really crucial part of why we reference. Okay. Secondly, and this is probably one of the most important parts at postgraduate level, is to situate yourselves within the wider discussion. So one of the things about postgraduate level study, Stuart, Lucy, and Claire will have been touching on this earlier, but one of the big things about postgraduate level study is that you are engaging with a wider discussion, a wider debate around about your topic in terms of the investigation that you were doing, the research that you're undertaking, the writing that you are doing around about that topic. Okay. What we look for is for postgraduate students is for them to show an awareness of where your work, your idea sits within a kind of wider framework or a wider discussion around that topic. So what we look for is to see that your ideas, your concepts are based on the reading that you have done through this year, based on the work that you have undertaken, right? So that situation of yourself within that wider discussion, within that wider framework is a crucial, crucial part of postgraduate level research, study, and writing. And we prove that, we show that with our references. Right? So we show the place in which our work sits. We show the key texts that our work engages with. We show the key ideas that our work draws on. We show the key quotes, the key data, the key information that we're using. All of that we show through references. Okay. Thirdly, we use references to provide support for our arguments. Again, one of the features of postgraduate level study, one of the features of postgraduate level writing is that you will be developing arguments, you'll be developing and taking positions on topics where we don't necessarily know the answer. Right? So by the end of your master's degree, you'll be building and creating a dissertation. That dissertation equips you to be the expert in the field on that topic. Right? It's normally a really, really narrow topic, a really narrow discussion, but there is nobody else in the world at that point that will know more about that topic than you. Right? So you will be building the argument for that. Right. My own example, my master's dissertation was on a British Army general in the 1760s and 1770s. Nobody else really knows who he was. Nobody else really cares who he was. But I know what he had for breakfast on the 24th of April, 1763, and nobody else knew that. Right. So that idea of that support for our arguments, I wasn't making an argument about his breakfasts, but the support for our arguments comes from the way in which we can engage with our texts. And the way in which we engage with our texts is via referencing them. Okay. Lastly, or second from lastly, but the last two are connected, is all around about plagiarism. Right? We must, in academic texts, we must show where our work, where our ideas, where our concepts, and where our information comes from. Right? So this idea of an obligation to show where your work comes from, avoiding plagiarism, and demonstration of the integrity of our work, that all happens with references. We'll talk much more about the practical way of doing this in a moment, but fundamentally, every part of your degree is based on this understanding of the obligation of showing where your information has come from. Right? We require you to understand the ways in which you show where you've got your information from, where your ideas have come from, where your concepts have come from. Okay. So yes, referencing is about those bottom two. It's about avoiding plagiarism. But actually, when we do this at postgraduate level, one of the big features of it is that situation of ourselves within the wider discussion and that engaging with a line of argument or with a line of interpretation that allows you to show off the mastersness of your work. Okay. So let's think then about what do we mean by academic integrity? University of Glasgow has a very particular definition of this, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But crucially, academic integrity is this. It's, as I was saying, essential for most coursework assignments at degree level to include references to other people's work. We expect it, right? That's part of what academic texts look like. Okay. If you are not including references, you are then excluding yourself from that academic conversation. right? And as I said, at postgraduate level, that is crucial and key. Right? That's what we're looking for you to do. We're looking for you to engage with the most current, the most up-to-date, the most key texts, investigations, discussions, and papers around about your topic, and show us that you understand what they say, what they are, how they might be interpreted. All of these things are absolutely crucial at postgraduate level. Okay. You're also then, by doing this, establishing your credentials, your credibility as a student in your subject area, right? Like I said, at the end of the degree, at the end of this year, so this time next year, you will have created a dissertation. That dissertation will be the most in-depth investigation into that topic that has ever happened, probably. You have to be credible as a student and as a researcher, and that credibility comes from academic integrity. Okay. So to maintain that credibility, we have to reference properly the sources that we are using, right? If we don't do that, what we have is what's called plagiarism. You probably all have heard this word before. I flash it up on the screen in big, bold text because it is important and it is significant. Plagiarism is the inappropriate use or the inappropriate incorporation of others' ideas, concepts, words, data, or phrases without acknowledgement, okay, without telling us where they have come from. So the University of Glasgow then has a really particular definition of this. Most of the time, most students don't read what the definition is. We'll cover this in a moment because I really want to preface it and focus on it. But the fundamental thing to keep in mind here is that referencing helps us avoid plagiarism. Okay. Without references, you are then plagiarizing. Right. Again, we'll talk about what this looks like in practicality, but failing to reference those external contents or those external ideas or those external words counts as plagiarism. Okay. Importantly, at the University of Glasgow, even if the plagiarism is unintentional, so even if you don't mean to plagiarize, it still counts as plagiarism. Right. So it doesn't matter whether you mean to copy somebody else's ideas or you mean to steal somebody else's ideas or you do it accidentally, the view is the same from the university. Okay. And the reason for that is it doesn't actually matter whether you do it intentionally or not. It still undermines that credibility of the work. Okay. Plagiarism statement is there, but we'll take a quick tour through it and see what it says. So this is the one that applies specifically to us at the University of Glasgow. Right? This is the University of Glasgow's definition. So plagiarism is the submission or presentation of work in any form, so it doesn't just apply to essays, which is not your own, right? Without acknowledgement of the sources. Plagiarism also includes inappropriate collaboration with others, so that can be working in groups and submitting the same essay, for example, as a group. Okay. For postgraduate students, there's also an additional challenge of what we call auto-plagiarism. So special cases of plagiarism can arise from students using their own previous work. This is previous work that can have been submitted at any university across the world. This is when you reuse your own work, your own writing from before, and submit it as a second piece of work. Right? So that's called auto-plagiarism or self-plagiarism. So auto-plagiarism includes using work that has already been submitted for assessment at this university or any other university across the world. Okay. That's rarer for undergraduates, but as postgraduate students, you already have a degree, so you've already studied and written somewhere. You cannot reuse the same text, you cannot reuse the same work for a second submission. Okay. Other things to think about for this are the incorporation of material without formal and proper acknowledgement, as I said, even with no intention to cheat, can constitute plagiarism. So work may be considered to be plagiarized if you have a direct quotation. So that is when you lift words from another text and place it into your text, your writing, and pretend that those words are your own, right? So don't put them in, if you do not put them in quotation marks and don't give us a reference, the marker will think those words are your own. that's then plagiarism. You're passing off the words of somebody else as your own. Okay. Second one is a close paraphrase. Paraphrasing is where you take the words and ideas of somebody else and you rewrite them into your own writing, your own language, your own words, but you don't tell us where those ideas or those concepts have come from. Right? So that's an unacknowledged paraphrase. And then the third one is an unacknowledged summary of a source, direct copying, or transcription. Again, you're using others' ideas, evidence, information, data, but you're not telling us where they come from. Right? So that unacknowledged summary, you're drawing in other people's work without telling us that it is the work of other people. Okay. Those three things count as plagiarism. We've also got the rule here. So with regards to things like essays, reports, and dissertations, so most written submissions, the rule is actually pretty straightforward. If any information or ideas are obtained from any source, that source must be acknowledged according to the appropriate convention in that discipline, i.e. using the particular referencing style that your subject area will tell you to use. Right? The University of Glasgow has no one referencing style. There are different referencing styles in different subject areas, and different subjects do this slightly differently, but the acknowledgement must still be there. Okay. Any direct quotation, so any lifting of words from one place into your text where you don't change the words, must be placed in quotation marks, and the source must be cited immediately. Right? So you must tell us straight after the quote where that information has come from. Okay, so anytime you lift words, you take words from somewhere or somebody else, you have to put them in quotation marks and you have to include the references to where that comes from. Okay. Any failure to acknowledge or to cite properly any of this use of sources counts as plagiarism. Okay. Under exam conditions, so if you've got any exams, material learnt by rote or close paraphrase, so if you memorize something, you memorize a text, then you'll also be expected to cite that, right, to reference that in your exam. Okay, so keep in mind that you can plagiarize in exams, and keep in mind that if you are quoting anything, we expect a reference for that. Okay. Scott will come back and talk more about this in a bit, but we'll talk very quickly about plagiarism and artificial intelligence, AI. So if we're using AI tools to, for example, help us paraphrase, then that can be considered a breach of the code of conduct. It can be considered plagiarism because the words are no longer yours. Okay, so keep in mind, Scott will talk more about this in a bit, but keep in mind that the university expects you to acknowledge and reference where, when, how, and why you are using artificial intelligence. Okay. Keep in mind as well that things like essay writing services are also plagiarized or also count as plagiarism. The work must be your own. Okay. So a quick summary before we move on. Keep in mind, plagiarism, important. We're talking about it. I'm talking about it very seriously, but we're talking about it in this way because it is a crucial part of the success of your degree, right? So plagiarism is, to summarize this, the rewriting or the using of others' ideas or words without acknowledgement, without a reference. Okay. Plagiarism is also copying sections of text and passing those texts off as your own writing. It's also buying or borrowing others' work without acknowledgement, so using other people's work, again, without acknowledging them. Same with regards to hiring somebody, essay writing services, and so on. Using AI to generate your text, or working with other students to cheat and collaborate. Okay, so keep this in mind. As you're working through your texts in your master's year, keep in mind that this is a crucial element of your studies. Keep in mind that it is a crucial part of what we expect you to do, and that the university takes it really very seriously. Okay, so if we take a quick look an example, and I'll give you a moment just to read the text here. So we've got on the left the source. The left-hand text here is our source of information. Let's say that's from a journal article. On the right is my essay, right? So I'm writing about this reality TV concept, and on the right is my submitted text. I'll give you a moment to read this. Okay, so left, original text, text from the article, right, my essay. This is problematic. Okay, my submission here would count as plagiarism. Right? And it would count as plagiarism. It's not the worst case of plagiarism, but it's bad academic practice. Okay, and the reason for this is there are copied phrases without quotation marks. So that first sentence, reality TV claims to feature ordinary people doing ordinary things. Okay, that text is lifted exactly and identically from that first sentence of my original text, and I haven't quoted it, and I haven't acknowledged it immediately. Okay, so immediately plagiarism because I'm copying phrases without quotation marks and without references. Second one is this, the rest of the paragraph here is really too close to the original. It's not quite the words identically as they are in the original text, but words have just been changed a little bit or have maybe been put through a thesaurus to change one word from a particular word to another word that's basically the same word. And there's no real distinction or there's no real difference between what the original text is saying and what I am now saying, right? So that text is too close to the original to be my own words, right? And in my essay, then it should be my words. What we're looking for is your writing on a topic. So it's too close. And then the third one is, well, your reference is incomplete. Okay, you don't have a correct reference. There is no referencing style that will just ask for an author's name, right? The referencing style is incomplete. We need the year in this case, and we need the page number to tell us where this information has come from. Okay. So that submitted text then would count as a breach of academic conduct. Okay, because we're not acknowledging our sources, we're not acknowledging them properly and according to the rules of the subject area, and our paraphrasing has kept us too close to the original text. So some things to think about here then. How do we integrate references into our writing? Popular approach, please don't do this. Popular approach here is how I cite my essays. So this was a student writing this and joking about it. I write down what I think, and then I just search Google Scholar for an hour until I find some mad historian or something from 1830 that agrees with me and I cite them, right? Don't do that. That's not the approach that we want you to take, okay? And I say that as a historian who probably at some point or another has used some historian from the 1830s to prove a point. That's not the approach that we take, okay? What we want you to do instead is think about the arguments that you're making. Think about the data, the information, the words, the quotes that you have to present, and present that based on the research that you have undertaken that then answers your essay question, right? So the way in which we do this is in all cases whatsoever at university, and especially at postgraduate level, our work is built from the evidence up and never from our idea down. So what I mean by that is we start with the evidence as the basis of what we know to be true or can check to be true, and then we build our interpretation up on top of that. We never go into a topic thinking the answer is X and then look for the information to support that. Okay, that's called, you get what's called confirmation bias with that. It's bad practice. Okay, so as you plan and as you structure your essays, keep note of where your sources are coming from, where your references might be to, and keep in mind that this is an ongoing process as you write your essays, as you write your reports, as you write your dissertation. Okay, so this approach then should be that you are using the evidence that you are gathering as the bedrock and the basis of the arguments that you are then building up on top of that. Okay. The way in which we then integrate this is through citations, references, as I've been mentioning. Citations or references are the parts inside the text, so in the text of the essay, the report, the dissertation, that point to where that external information is being used. So you have a sentence. At the end of the sentence, you show us where the information that that sentence is based on has come from. Okay. There are many different ways and styles and formats to do this. So there are different referencing styles. There's a link on the slides, which you've got access to on the Moodle, which will take you through all the different types of referencing styles and formats. But you should follow the rules of the referencing style for your subject area. And every subject will tell you what the rule is. Right? You will always be told that in advance. You then have, as well as this, a reference list or a bibliography. So you have your in-text citations, the ones that happen in the flow of the essay or the report or the dissertation. And then at the end, you have your reference list or your bibliography. And this details all of the bibliographic, all of the information on what sources you used to cite or what sources you actively cited and used through your essay or your report or your dissertation. When thinking about using external material, a couple of things to think about. As it says in our guidance, you can use them as a quote. This is where you match the sources word for word. And as I said, they're normally marked out with quotation marks and then must have a reference immediately after. Paraphrasing, you don't match the source word for word. So you change the writing into your own text, but you're using the ideas from somewhere or somebody else. You put it then into your own words and you cite that, you reference that at the end with information as to where has that information, with details on where that information has come from. And then the last one is summarizing. Again, this is written in your own writing, your own words, but you present an overview of the text, an overview of a paper, maybe an overview of an article, and it's much shorter and compressed down. And again, requires a reference. So every one of these, quotation, paraphrasing, summarizing, every one of them requires a reference. And what we're looking for you to do there is show us where this information has come from. Okay, so think about that credibility as a student as to showing your marker, where does this come from? How do I know this is true? How do I know this is checkable? How do I know this is verifiable? Well, as a marker, what I'm looking to do there is say, well, what's the reference? Where has this come from? Okay. And that's what we do as markers. That when we're looking at your work, that's one of the things that we're looking for. So keep in mind quotations, paraphrasing, summarizing, and keep in mind that whenever you are drawing on any information, any evidence, any ideas, any quotes from anywhere else, they must be referenced. Lastly, then, bibliography, before I hand over to Scott. Bibliography will sometimes be called a reference list or a list of references. Different subjects call this slightly different things. But the crucial thing for this is it's a list of all the sources that you have actively used in your essay or your report or your dissertation, and it's not a place to show the marker all the things that you wish you should have read or might have had time to have read or might have used. That's not it. Right? It's a source, a list of all of the things, the sources that you have actively cited, that you have used in the text of your essay or your report or your dissertation. Okay, so again, when I'm marking essays, one of the things I'll do is have the bibliography at the end, the student's bibliography, and I will tick off each source as it's actively used in the essay itself. If it's not, it doesn't count and I put a score through it. Okay, so it's a list of all the things you have actively consulted. Okay, so keep in mind, before I hand over to Scott to discuss AI, keep in mind for academic integrity and for plagiarism, that acknowledgement and understanding of where your information has come from, where your ideas have come from, where your quotes have come from is crucial It doesn't matter whether you intend to cheat, whether you intend to plagiarize, or whether you do it accidentally. The university doesn't make a distinction there. Make sure you are fully aware of where all of your ideas are coming from, and always, always, always reference them. Okay. And if you are in doubt at any point throughout your year, don't worry. You're not the only person who will be in doubt or have questions about this. It's really, really normal to have questions about academic integrity. It's really common to have questions about plagiarism. That's what our department, SLD, that's what we are there to do. So if at any point you have questions about this, keep in mind we are there to help you throughout the year. Okay. Crucially, come and speak to us before you submit the work. Okay, so we can help with you before you submit the work. Okay, I'm going to pass over to Scott, and he's going to talk about how this is all kind of shifting a little bit, or how we use AI in ways that allow us to maintain academic integrity. Scott.
So artificial intelligence is tricky because it's possible to use it to improve. It's technically possible to use it to improve the work that you have used, right? So even down at the smallest end of the spectrum, we have AI enhancements in things like Grammarly, which is a tool that lots of people will use just to make sure that their writing is technically correct, right? The grammar, the punctuation, and the syntax is all there. This type of improvement, just straightforward using a piece of software to help check the grammar, has been around for many years. But when artificial intelligence starts to creep in to improve or make suggestions about how to improve the piece of work itself, then that's when you start to move into a place where it's more dangerous, because you're no longer then submitting something that is a reflection of your own thoughts, perhaps. If at the very least, it's not a reflection of your own ability to communicate those thoughts. So you have to be very careful about how you use artificial intelligence. And your subject lecturers will be able to have more detailed conversations with you about what is appropriate for a specific assignment that you might be working on. There may be things that you're expected to use artificial intelligence for, but you need to make sure that you're very clear that the subject lecturers who'll be marking your work have told you you are allowed to use it for these things, or you're not allowed to use it for this type of thing. It's also important to be aware that you may have exams in physical exam halls, in which case your exam's likely to be you, a desk, a piece of paper, and a pen. So avoid getting into the habit of using electronic tools all the time, if that means that you're not in the habit of also being able to produce an essay under exam conditions without that tool. Right. So those are my general warnings before I start. And if we can have the next slide, please, Andrew. Your role here is to make sure that you can demonstrate to the university that you're worth a degree, a master's degree. Right. So if we look at these 4 white boxes in the center first, or in the smallest central level here, there are artificial intelligence tools which will help you do things that are more than just producing text. Right. I think we're all familiar with something like ChatGPT, which is there as a large language model to produce text. But there are other tools which will do other more specific jobs, and those might be okay to use. So, for example, there are tools that will help find relevant literature. There are databases, and I'm not suggesting that those are artificial intelligence. I'm saying those are the oldest types of existing technology to help us find literature. But then with more machine learning on top of that, we now have tools that have the power to say, okay, if you give me one reference to begin with, one article that you have read, I can now go and find other articles that are connected to this because either they mention the same topics, or because they cite this paper, or vice versa, this paper cites them. And so one of the most well-established tools is called Research Rabbit, and it will generate networks where you can see dots in a network that represent lots of articles within a field. And the size of the dot represents how many times it's been cited by the other articles that it's connected to. And this is really helpful in going beyond a simple database search, which is an important skill that you absolutely should have. But you can go beyond a database search to maybe find things that your search terms in that database would not have picked up. The second box here says mapping ideas and topics across time. This is sort of related to that same idea that if you give a topic to one of these tools, then you can see how that topic has developed across time. So one of the things that Research Rabbit will do is it won't just give you a network, it'll give you I don't really know how to describe this column that I could picture in my head, but more detailed information on the articles that it's suggested to you in the results that it's giving back. Cross-referencing citation usage, again, is what I've been talking about there. And the fourth box on the end says that there are tools that will summarize the text of sources. So one of the biggest challenges when you're operating at master's level is dealing with the sheer amount of information. So you could read articles forever, right? Because you'll always find something that is connected to what you just read. And your choice is to say, okay, I have read enough information now, and I think I have everything that I need to either write the essay that I've been asked to write or to formulate a good dissertation topic that I can write a solid, focused dissertation about. And that choice is difficult to make. I would advise that you talk to your your dissertation supervisors at that stage, and they'll help you decide whether you have enough. But having enough means reading lots of information first. So AI tools are available to help summarize the text of a source. I mention this now to say just be very careful about how you use those, because if you use a summarizer which reduces the text from 10,000 words in an article down into one paragraph, there's going to be lots of information, lots of discussion, lots of critical analysis in that source, which did not make it into that one very short paragraph. And with some tools, you can say, give me one paragraph or give me one sentence of a summary of this source, right? And so you can either misunderstand something because the summary doesn't have all of the nuance, the context that's necessary for a proper understanding of that source. Or also the summary may just be wrong. Let's not forget that all of these are algorithmically generated. There's no human checking that actually what's been summarized is an accurate reflection of what was the original full source. So be very careful. Use them in a way that you have checked, because as you can see in the blue box that surrounds all of this, your overarching role is this list of tasks. So curating, right? You'll be given lots of pieces of information by whatever information searching tools that you use. Your job is to curate them. So you need to decide, what do you think is trustworthy? What was written by an authoritative source and an authoritative author? What was published in a reputable journal or other type of source? It's also your job to, as it says next, check for sense and for errors. We talked about that a minute ago. It's your job to synthesize. So the worst dissertations often just simply say, Ramsey in 2007 said blah, blah, blah. Struan in 2009 said blah, 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 right? That's just listing information that you've found. But at master's level, you need more than in your undergraduate level to synthesize that into an argument that is yours, which is related to the next one, which is critiquing. So telling us what you think is good or not so good about the sources that you've read and the arguments that are contained within them. Taking a position. So if it's appropriate to the question implicit in your essay or your dissertation, tell us what you believe, because your job is to persuade the reader of your piece what they should believe. And that involves you having a belief about the truth of the subject in the first place. And ultimately, as the last list item there says, your job is to create a piece of output, an essay, a dissertation, a report that addresses the actual research question. It shouldn't just be a summary of everything that you found, but your research question should be something you decide with your dissertation supervisor or something that was put into the essay question that you were set by the course staff. So use tools to help you do these things. As I said at the start of this slide, your main responsibility by doing this degree is to persuade us that you are worthy of a master's level degree. And if all you do is use the tools to generate all of the assignments for you, you haven't done that. Okay, next slide, please. So using artificial intelligence tools with integrity, i.e. avoiding plagiarism. The University of Glasgow says that the use of these tools must always be acknowledged and often, but not always referenced. And the reason for that distinction is because if you're using a tool to find information, then we have a referencing convention for that, right? Andrew's been talking about that for the first half of this session. But what do you do if you have used an artificial intelligence tool to take some numbers that were presented in a table and turn them into a paragraph, or the other way around? Right? If you're just reformatting your data, the referencing convention we have for academic sources doesn't really suit that. So you should still find a way to acknowledge that you use that tool. And if you talk to your subject staff about the best ways to do that in your subject area, it might be that you mention it in a footnote or an equivalent to say these tools were used to help generate this report. That type of thing might be an appropriate acknowledgement. Next point here on the slide says all AI-produced content must be overseen, reviewed, and evaluated. That's because if there is ever any question of plagiarism or other academic misconduct, you will need to explain how you produced all of these pieces to a member of staff. And if you haven't decided that you have overseen everything, reviewed it, evaluated it, and you're happy with it, then that's going to be a really uncomfortable conversation with that staff member when that happens. Remember that AI is not a replacement for your own work or your own wording. This is what I meant when I said that you need to prove that you're worthy of a master's degree. And AI should not be used in the creation of data sets. So if you're working in a subject area where you need to analyze some information, right? That could be numbers, it could be survey responses, any type of data that you gather so that you can analyze. Even sources, right? I can't really imagine that this happens, but you should not use artificial intelligence to synthesize a historical document just because you think it would help complete your analysis, right? Maybe you've tried to find something somewhere that you just can't find. Even though there is no real world impact right now in you writing a dissertation based on falsified evidence, if what you're trying to do is show that you have the skills to analyze something, it's ethically very, very dubious. Because if you start to do that type of thing to fill gaps while you're here at university, it starts to normalize the practice. And then when you graduate and you become a professional, whatever type of subject academic you're training to be, it leads us into down a slippery slope. Okay, next slide, please. The department that we work in, Student Learning Development, has produced the university's central guidance pages for students. So that link at the bottom here, which is basically just the university's homepage / you don't need to type the My Glasgow, but it is part of the URL at the end, /SLD for our department name, /AI is where you can find this. Well, maybe Andrew could put it into the chat there for anyone who's on Zoom so they can easily click on it. The guidance is short, brief, and to the point. So you can see from the screenshot there that there is a simple list of do's and don'ts. And then as you scroll down the page beyond where this screenshot ends, you can see more detail about, for example, how to reference and how to cite your use of artificial intelligence. Obviously, AI tools are developing month by month, and new tools are becoming available. Existing tools get new capabilities. So I would always come back and check this page whenever you need to submit something, to see if we have added new guidance on how to cite or reference or acknowledge a new tool that wasn't available for you at the start of the year today. But that's the central place to look. The subject area that you're studying in will also go into more detail in presumably the course handbook for your course. And again, as I've said several times, if you have any doubt, talk to your course lecturers, or you can come to talk to us as well. So our department, as you'll have heard, or you will hear as the week goes by, has a whole range of resources online, plus the ability for you to book a one-to-one appointment to talk to the advisor for your college. Next, please. Thanks. So we mentioned that it's your job to check that you believe or you're happy with the output of artificial intelligence tools. We have tried to find some examples of tasks where we think artificial intelligence is actually useful for a student in doing something in a way that has academic integrity. And actually, we've found it quite difficult. So the next few slides will show you some of the dangers and pitfalls to look out for should you be using AI in your studies. So we gave ChatGPT this following prompt: list some key references on the topic of anti-predator behaviors. So this is a topic in biology. You have predators, and there are behaviors that can help stop predators from attacking you. Those are called anti-predator behaviors. We were just looking for some references to start maybe some research on an essay or a dissertation about this. And the next slide here has the results of that research. So you can see across the very top, ChatGPT said, certainly, here are some key references on the topic of anti-predator behaviors in animals. And then everything that's highlighted here is an example of an error or a thing that isn't true about that source. So under number 4, you can see at the end, we've added the text. It says error. This is actually issue 10. So the citation there said issue 12, which you can see just slightly to the left on that line. So if someone had gone to try to chase up that reference and find the original source, they wouldn't find it in issue 12, which then leads to a question of, well, did this student actually read this article? If they didn't tell us exactly where it was, how do we know they've seen it? The number 6, the error here was that the paper was a statistical paper. It wasn't actually related to the topic. So again, here we're thinking of a situation where maybe a student who's run out of time for their dissertation is doing something like this to try to find extra references to stick in to make it look like they've done some more reading. Actually, if they had included this, which is terrible practice in the first place, you should never cite something that you haven't read and use to build your argument on. But this student would very clearly have been caught out for doing something non-integritous because the paper is not related to the topic in the first place. And again, I wouldn't read them all out, but you can see that there are several types of errors that means that the sources here are not really useful for the task that we were trying to put them towards. Number 12 doesn't even exist. So if you're going to use a tool to find literature, start with an academic database like you've probably always done through your undergraduate degree. And then if you want to augment that with something more, use a tool that's actually built for helping you with that task rather than trying to, I don't want to use the word cheat, but it's the only word in my head at the moment as I think of this sentence on the fly, rather than trying to cheat your way to building a reference list with a generic artificial intelligence tool like a chatbot. Okay, next slide, please. One of the other tasks that we thought would be helpful is if we could get some feedback on some writing from a large language model like ChatGPT. And by virtue of the fact that it is a large language model, we thought perhaps it will be able to analyze language and tell us what's good about it and what could be improved. So this paragraph here is the abstract to my own PhD thesis. And I've just colored each of the sentences a different color according to broadly the spectrum from red through to violet as you work your way through the rainbow. Apologies, I realise that in every audience there will be a fraction of you who have one colour blindness type or another, but I could not think of another easy way to highlight the differences between one sentence and the next, and I'll narrate what's going on regardless. So on the next slide, you can see the feedback that I was given on this paragraph. I wouldn't read it all out, but at the start it says, your paragraph provides a detailed overview of research related to heat stress, drought stress, and the impact on plant productivity and survival. This is all correct. The second last sentence, where's my cursor? I'm not sure if you can see my cursor because we're looking at Andrew's screen here. Oh, we can. Okay, so it says here, overall, it provides a comprehensive insight into the research's scope, methodologies, and significant outcomes, contributing to a deeper understanding of plant stress responses. Again, that's all correct. Consider breaking down some of the complex sentences for better readability and ensure that the terminology is clear and accessible to a broader audience. This is for a PhD. I don't want to make my research accessible to a broad audience. I want to prove that I'm capable of writing at the highest level of academic ability. So the advice I got here isn't really applicable to the context that I'm working within. That was slightly worrying. But I mean, ultimately, it does say this is a good paragraph. And I was pleased with that because it was, as I said, for a PhD, right? It's that you would hope that I had mastered some level of academic writing by this point. Then on the next slide, I thought, okay, I'm a scientist. I'll do the experiment. I'll see if it tells me it's good if I scramble the sentences. So now the colors no longer follow the red through to violet. It's the same content, it's just in a different order. And again, I said, give me feedback on this paragraph. So skipping forward to the feedback, ChatGPT said, your paragraph provides an in-depth overview of the research conducted in your thesis, specifically focusing on blah, blah, blah. So the wording is slightly different, but the message is the same. It says, you've done a good job here writing about this topic. The final sentence in this paragraph says, overall, your paragraph conveys a comprehensive and insightful research approach while highlighting the significance of your findings. If I had given you enough time to read the scrambled paragraph, you would have struggled to understand what was going on because it jumps from experimental output to conclusion to introduction. It's not legible. It's not comprehensible to a human, really. So then to take the experiment one final step further, I gave the scrambled sentence to ChatGPT and I said, can you please rewrite this to sound more like a PhD thesis abstract? And it did. It did a pretty good job of putting the sentences back into the correct order, starting with an introduction, going through the methodology, discussing the results, again, in its own words, though, not mine. And then I took the rewritten version and the scrambled version, or let me rephrase that because I'll say it in the order they're on the screen here, the scrambled version and the reconstructed version, and I asked for feedback on both of these one last time, right? So we've got one terrible version and one good version that ChatGPT itself rebuilt from that. On its own version, it gave some longer feedback this time. I changed the prompt and said, give me feedback and rate this paragraph in the context of an academic essay. So it starts to break it down into the things that are relevant for academia. You can see that each paragraph here starts with a subtopic like content and structure, clarity and precision, language and style. On its own reconstructed version, the final paragraph here says, overall, I would rate this paragraph as 4.5 out of 5. It effectively conveys the purpose, methods, and outcomes of your research. Okay, so this is fine. It was, as I said, a good reconstruction of my abstract, and it's rated it quite highly. Okay. If we compare it with the equivalent feedback on the scrambled one, it says, in that same equivalent final paragraph, overall, I would rate this paragraph as 4.7 out of 5. So it's even higher for the scrambled one than for the reconstructed one. So the take-home message from this is be very, very cautious about the fact that an artificial intelligence tool can give you an output, whether that's an output that's been generated from scratch, or whether it's feedback on something that you fed it. It can give you that output in a tone that sounds like it came from someone who understood and knew what they were talking about. But the evidence here just does not support that. It ranked a scrambled paragraph as 4.7 out of 5. So use your own critical analysis when you take the output of any artificial intelligence tool, and think very carefully before you decide to incorporate it into whatever you're going to submit to the university here. Because if you're not careful, and if you haven't learned the fundamentals of the subject, then you might submit something that a marker will recognize as being nonsensical. So final take-home message from this is that it's ultimately up to you to prove that you have mastered your subject, as Andrew mentioned earlier, and you've communicated your mastery of that subject to us through the ways that you find, critique, synthesize, and analyze the sources that you're going to use as you go through the next year of your degree. Some artificial intelligence tools are available to help you with that, but be careful about what you use them for, and be careful about taking the output and saying, yes, I'm proud and pleased enough to be able to say my name is going to go on the top of this. So that's essentially everything that we want to say about AI. There are some more resources that you can use in your own time. We have a Moodle site with the name of Good Academic Practice, which goes through plagiarism in more detail. These slides are obviously available on the Moodle for T2G Postgrad, so you can download this PowerPoint and follow these links. The second one is the University of Glasgow's plagiarism statement, which Andrew read an excerpt from at the start. We have some referencing guidance at the University Library's website. There is an example of the MHRA style guide there, which walks you through all the details of what goes into a reference in that particular referencing format, which is very common in the arts and the humanities. And just as another example, Anglia Ruskin University has a really excellent guide to the Harvard system. So if you have never used those systems before, maybe you're changing topic as you come in to do your master's degree, those are two excellent starters on two very common referencing styles. Others exist. Check with your subject area which one you're supposed to use, but here are some references, some resources to use. And I think that's everything that we need to say. Andrew, is there anything else that I've forgotten or you want to come back and say?
No, I don't think so. Thanks very much, Scott. So I think just as a very last comment on this, just keep in mind that this academic integrity is something that you have to learn. You know, it's something that is important to learn and understand. But keep in mind as well that your staff and the SLD across the year are there to help with it. Okay, so don't let it be a source of stress. Don't let it be a source of worry or anxiety. We're there to help, to make sure that you fully understand academic integrity and plagiarism, and can engage with your studies in an open and transparent way. So up next is a question and answer session. I'll hand over to Stuart and let Stuart take on the question and answer session. But thank you very much, everybody, and speak soon.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew and Scott. Very much appreciated, and really, really good advice, and very, very important information for you to think about in terms of starting your course. Again, we've talked a lot about this program being setting you off on the best possible foot before you start your studies, and that level of academic integrity, as we talked about in relation to the masters and its facets, and professionalism is one of the most important ones. And I know as well that the use of AI is something that a lot of students tend to ask us in SLD about, so hopefully that was useful to you. So what we're going to do now is maybe give you just a couple of minutes if you want to go and stretch your legs, get away from your desk. What I'll do is I will invite all of our panelists up onto screen here while you do that, and we will start with our next session in around 3 or 4 minutes. So if you want to take a quick break, please do so while I set everything up here on the Zoom session. Okay, everyone, so I will just start the recording and we will make a start. As you can see, Claire, for those of you that are here live on the Zoom, has posted the link to the Mentimeter for questions for the Q&A there. And for those of you joining us on YouTube, I will display the Mentimeter code shortly. So what I'll do is I'll flip the recording on and we can get started. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our final session of the day, our final T2G Postgrad core session of the first day of Transition to Glasgow Postgraduate Edition. Now, I know it's been quite a long day and you've had a lot of information moving in your direction today, but I hope that a lot of that information has been useful and that you've got a lot out of the program. So what we want to do now for the last sort of probably about an hour and a half rather than the full 2 hours here, because we know it's been quite a long day, is we want to have a bit of a postgraduate reflection session. So that will involve some of our SLD graduate teaching assistants. So when I say graduate teaching assistants, I mean that these are students that work with us who are either current PhD students or students who have recently finished their PhDs, who have studied their masters much more recently than perhaps some of us who work in SLD, and therefore will have their own reflections on what they wish they'd known at the start of their master's courses. So where you are now. So we're going to have a few of them discuss their reflections on what they wish they'd done differently or what they did and worked really well during their master's courses to give you the benefit of their experience. So we'll start off having those reflections, and hopefully that will help prompt some questions for you if you haven't asked any already for our Q&A session. So again, we'll run the Q&A session from Mentimeter. So I will show the QR code just shortly for those of you here in the live session. Of course, if you are watching along later and you haven't been able to attend the live session, then please do still ask any questions you have using the Q&A forum on Moodle. You can post there by just clicking Add Discussion Topic, and you can post any questions you have about postgraduate study. Now, again, questions that we can answer are anything around postgraduate study, anything to do with the T2G postgrad program, anything to do with what SLD can do and help you developing your academic literacies. What we can't, unfortunately, answer questions on, even though I know that a lot of you are concerned about it, things like registration and enrollment, things like funding, things like when you choose your courses, when your classes, when you start your courses. All of this is something that we don't really do or work with. So I'm afraid those aren't questions that we can answer. However, we have posted the offer holders webpage at the university website in several locations. That's where you can get answers to these sort of questions. So what we'll be focusing on today is very much questions about the program, about postgraduate level study, and about working effectively as a postgraduate student. So that's what we're going to do. So, and also, actually, I realized I hadn't flagged this up, but I've put this on a couple of the slides. So you'll see here the image of the Lego grad student Tumblr. This is something that when I was doing my PhD became quite comforting to me in realizing that I very much wasn't alone in my feelings. And in terms of postgraduate reflections, if I can just add my own before I invite our GTAs to give theirs, this is exactly my main thing I remember from my master's, was going to the library and taking out a massive pile of books and thinking, I'm going to read all of these books and I'm going to be so organized. And then the next thing would happen is I would get a notification from the library website saying that those books that I hadn't even opened yet were due back. So what we were talking about earlier, what Claire was talking about time management and workload, that's something to think about there. And hopefully some of the other GTAs can talk a bit about their experiences. So what I'll do now is I will bring up our first GTA, but as the GTAs are speaking, I'm just going to leave the QR code on the screen. So that way you can, if you have any questions as they're speaking, you can add that to the Mentimeter so we can pick that up afterwards. So let me just make sure we're all set here on the Zoom before I invite the first person up. Okay. So I think first up is going to be Sally. So Sally, if you are okay to put your camera on, let me know if you can. I know there's a setting in the Zoom that maybe says you can't. So if you try and put your camera on if you can. And if not, nope, okay, let me try and fix that for you.
I can turn my audio off. So I am, hi everyone. Just can't use my video.
There we go. If you try it now, it should work.
Okay. There we go. Oh, I forgot I had that background. Oh, well. Hi, everyone. So my name is Sally. Thank you, Stuart, for introducing and letting me start off the panel. Very briefly, I did my doctorate at Glasgow. I'm clearly not Glaswegian. So any international students, I will also talk about what it was like kind of moving here and things that helped me along. But I am aware that we have been given a brief amount of time for each. So I'm just going to dive right in on the things that I wish I'd known. I would say that the first thing and the thing really that I really wish I could go back and tell past me was that there was no right way to do this or to approach this, that there is no like one solution that my supervisors and tutors and everyone is just hiding from me and I just have to figure out what's in their mind. I spent a lot of time and stress trying to figure out this solution that I thought everyone knew but me. And so I would recommend that you don't follow my lead. It can be very intimidating. Of course, there are expectations for a dissertation, word counts and types of writing styles and all the things that SLD covers. But the actual project itself is a really kind of cool opportunity that you should enjoy. And so I think the thing that I struggled with when I was looking for that right project was this idea that I would be proficient in this or like a master of this. It was really intimidating to me. I hated the idea of being a master because I was like, there was no way I can be a master at anything. And so every time I tried to think of the project that I would propose, I thought it had to be this huge project because if I'm a master of something, it must correlate that therefore it's a master of something big. I couldn't be further from the truth. So let me spare all of you that now and just say, no, it's not. You only have a year, right? So how can you tackle something huge if you only have a year? If only I knew this back then. And logically I did, but I just didn't connect the dots. Find something that's unique to you. Find your passion, find your joy, and that's where you will start to carve out the project that you will become like a master, quote unquote. I don't know why I keep saying that word, but that's the word that I keep coming back to. The other thing that I would say is in the beginning, I was, like I said, stressed about finding the answer. The beginning, I would really encourage play, really kind of explore, find your passions, think about the things that you've done in the past, the places that you've enjoyed to kind of help you figure out the project that you want to spend the rest of your year working on. And the other thing, academic related, that I would say is comparison is soul destroying. I was really bad for that. I would absolutely look at what all of my peers were doing alongside me, and I would be like, oh my gosh, they're ahead of me. Their project is more academic than mine. They're just a better graduate student than I am. It's awful. You just make yourself miserable. Every one of us is in our own, like we're all on the same kind of journey heading towards the same end, but it's individual to each of us. So don't worry about what your peers are doing. Support each other, because I did find great friends in my peer group when we were all studying the same thing, because you're all in it together. But try your best not to worry that if they're slightly ahead, that's okay. You'll get there. You're all going to get there in the end. Non-academic, moving to a new country can be hard. It was my first, I had moved around away from home, but it was the first time I'd left America. If you've never been to Glasgow or the UK, winters are cold and dark. Just gonna warn you now, around 3 o'clock, it's dark. It's dark a lot. So if that's something that you're not used to, the things, I'm from Florida, very sunny state. There's a lot of sun all the time. The things I would say that might help with that are don't hibernate, because it can be really tempting to just stay at home under all the blankets with a nice warm water bottle. Like, encourage yourself to go out, make friends, join the clubs. I did join a bunch of clubs and I met a lot of really wonderful people in those clubs. There's clubs for so many different things. If there's something you like, I'm sure they'll have a club for it. And then the other thing I would say is there is a lot going on, which can be a lot of fun, but I'm sure they've all mentioned with time management, don't be afraid to say no to things. So yes to lots of experiences and yes to lots of new things and travel and friends. But at times you have to recognize that you at times will also have to be the person that can say no. And I'm going to wrap.
I think Sally may have frozen. If you're listening, Sally, I think you may have just frozen. So while Sally is digitally frozen, one of the things that Sally mentioned there was learning more about what clubs and societies and what's going on at the university. On Thursday afternoon, when we have a presentation from the Students' Representative Council, they'll talk a bit about the clubs and societies available at the university. So that is something to look out forward to on Thursday afternoon as well. So I think Sally has lost connection as the classic online Zoom teaching. So I think what we'll do, as we're just about at time there for Sally anyway, I think just finishing up. So what we'll do is we'll move on to the next panelist. So I can't actually see Lydia here. So Josephine, would you be good to come up next?
Sure, no problem.
Thank you. And hopefully you can turn your camera on. Fantastic.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So just introduce yourself, maybe mention what you studied and where you studied for your master's, and then your reflections would be fantastic.
Okay. Thanks, Stuart. Josephine Zimba. I studied my master's elsewhere at the University of Dar es Salaam, and my master was in climate change and sustainable development. But I did study my PhD at the University of Glasgow, just graduated in June. My PhD was in geography, environmental geography. So my research was on resilience and urban flood risk management. So picking on from what Sally said, I agree with almost everything that Sally said. I shared most of those experiences, and as an international student, but also just like as a PG student at the University of Glasgow. I just wanted to highlight some things that I really enjoyed about studying PG study at the University of Glasgow. And the most important thing that I enjoyed was just learning about different things that people are studying. Sometimes when you're coming from whatever background, the only probably things that you know are things that you're studying or you studied before, but getting to know about research, about space, about dogs, about cats, about so many other things. It was so interesting. And I used to like the sessions, seminars, or some tea sessions where we just meet as PGR students or as PG students just to learn about other people's work. I really found that interesting. Well, things that I found a bit challenging was learning new ways of doing things, learning new ways to approaching study. So my background was, before I studied my PhD, was really just environmental science. So it was so sciencey. But then my PhD study had so much of a social sciencey element. So it was for me, it was a huge change. And I think I took a lot of time struggling and trying to cling on to my environmental sciencey approach or ways of doing things. And if you find yourself in that situation, I would say, please don't take a lot of time. Like I did, I think I wasted a year or two just struggling and trying to do the social sciencey things using the sciencey approaches, and it didn't work. I think I just wasted a lot of time. So a bit of flexibility, because I think learning involves change, and being you need to change or learn new ways or unlearn some of the things that you might have learned previously to make progress. Something I wish I had known a bit earlier is some of the courses, the trainings, the sessions that are offered or services that are offered across the university that I would have benefited from the start, and not buying. I'm not saying this because SLD is here, but I think knowing about the drop-in sessions that happen across the year, I would have used that a lot at the start because I think I needed it. About academic writing, practice, and so many other services and courses that are offered across the university that you can just drop in, or you can book appointments with particular people that are there to support your learning. I think I wish I had known that earlier, and I hope you find that useful, that I say it, and so you can look for them. How I met new people. I mostly met new people in the seminars, when there's someone who's come to do a talk, or school-wide activities. So there are sessions that in the school they send emails, there's this speaker who's going to come, or there's this activity. If I go there, most of the times that's where I learned new people. And also some sessions where so I was a Commonwealth scholar. Commonwealth used to organize some activities, and then I met fellow scholars from other countries studying different things, and that's where I also met a few more other people. And I think most of the people that I met was through the GTA work that I did. So I met people from other departments across the university, especially with SLD, besides within the school that I was under. Maintaining work-life balance. That was a challenge. I think, like Sally said, when you get there and when you're there and you know you're studying for a master's or a PhD, whatever, you feel like I have to work, I need to be a master, but then life is also happening. And so it needs to be done, and life should be done as well. And so how I did that, I tried to plan for everything. I used to be a planner, but I think I started going a bit extreme to plan everything, to use my calendar a bit more than I did. So initially I just had to do, a to-do list, and I'm done. But then because there was just a lot of deadlines that I needed to keep track of, so I used the calendar as much as possible to try and schedule almost every meeting or every deadline or every activity that I need, including the personal issues that I need to handle as well. So I would like to signpost. I hope that's okay. I think that there is a course on time and project management that you probably find offered by the SLDS. I think that is so valuable when at the start, when you're not yet deep into issues, you might want to just have a look at it. That there are a few tips that I think are so valuable that you might benefit from in terms of time and project management, because there are going to be multiple deadlines flying around that you need to meet. And that was a bit of challenging, but those tips that you'd get from there, I think that they would be so helpful. Yeah, that's me, Stuart.
That's great. Thank you very much, Josephine. Again, lots of really, really useful points there. And we promise that our GTAs are not contractually obliged to mention SLD's wider resources, but we always appreciate when they do. So thank you very much, Josephine. So I think that brings us then to our last graduate teaching assistant. Alina, are you okay to come up?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Can, yeah, thank you very much. So again, just introduce yourself, what you studied at master's level and where you studied, and then just your reflections and what you wish you could tell former you.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'm Alina. I studied pharmacology at undergraduate level, and then I did a Master of Research, again in pharmacology. I did those two things at Aberdeen University, so in the northeast of Scotland, and then I moved down to Glasgow to do my PhD 2 years ago now. So yeah, like I say, I did a Master of Research degree, so that's slightly different to a taught master's degree. So I spent a year in the lab and then wrote up a thesis based on that, rather than having the 9 months taught and then 3 months in the lab as a taught Master of Science degree would be. But I think both the taught and the research side, they give you a good chance to, well, that's one of the things I liked the most, was going from being quite broad at undergraduate level to finally being able to choose a subject within pharmacology that I was most interested in, and then do that more specifically. So in my case, that was doing drug discovery and cancer research. So yeah, that's probably what I liked the most about my master, being able to focus more on a specific area of my degree. And yeah, the hardest thing probably will be if you are doing a science-based course that involves lab work, I think, is switching from doing labs once every 4 weeks for 3 hours or something during the top part of your course to actually being in the lab 24/7 and having like a proper project that you need to some extent design yourself, but also just learn loads and loads of techniques and learn new things. So yeah, I think something that I wish I had done more at the time has been less nervous to ask questions. I think it's very difficult at the beginning, knowing how things work. And remember being told things like once or twice and then still thinking, I didn't understand how to do that, or I can't remember how to do it, and feeling scared to ask again. But I think, you know, I wish I had asked more, because the PhD students all are really helpful. They want to help you. They've only been in that situation, you know, a year or two ago. So now I can almost look back as a PhD student when master students come in, and I can completely understand why they can't remember how to do a certain technique, for example. So my main tip would be ask other people around you. It's fine to ask. No one thinks you're stupid or being annoying. So yeah, the other good thing whilst you're doing your taught masters is there will be graduate teaching assistants in the labs as well. So yeah, ask those questions both about what you're doing, but also the graduate teaching assistants. They can be a very good source of information if you're trying to start thinking about what you want to do next. So if you want to, for example, do a PhD, or, you know, they might be good to ask where to apply, how to apply. So yeah, I taught on master's courses last year, and I got a lot of questions about that. And I'm really glad people asked, because I wish I had asked. So I thought, oh, well done for asking, because I didn't do that, and then I had to figure it all out myself. So yeah, ask graduate teaching assistants. Also, I think, as Sally mentioned at the beginning, don't be afraid of having to come up with an amazing project, an amazing thesis. Nothing is going to work first time, especially in the lab. If you've only got a 3-month project, you're probably going to spend 2 months just making mistakes and messing everything up, and it won't work. And then you'll have like 1 month of data that you're trying to get a thesis from, and that's absolutely fine. Like, don't worry. It's not really about, you know, coming up with this beautiful, shiny piece of work, but just that you've shown that you've learned something and learned from your mistakes and see where things went wrong. So it's more about the experience rather than maybe the actual output. And yeah, then finally, just, yeah, moving to Glasgow. So that was a big city. For me, I was moving south, so suddenly it was lighter for longer in the winter. So, you know, I had the opposite experience. And yeah, I think joining sports clubs or joining other societies is a very good idea. You can do that both at the university, but also outside. So I play badminton, and I joined just a local badminton club to do that. And that was a good way to meet lots of people too. So yeah, that was my kind of reflection of my time as a master's student.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Alina. And as Alina was saying, there might be some of you who are starting to think about a PhD level study, potentially after your master's. Again, just to flag up that we have a session from the research or development team on Thursday. Again, so if that is you and you're thinking a bit about possibly applying for a PhD, do come along to that session as well. Okay, so I think our final panelist has joined us. So Lydia, if you are okay to come up now and give your reflections, that would be fantastic.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep, all good. So
Okay.
just introduce yourself, say what you studied, and perhaps where you studied for your master's, and then just your reflections, Lydia, would be fantastic. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm Lydia. I'm studying for a PhD in biomedical engineering at the University of Glasgow now. For my master's, I studied Masters of Science in Medical Engineering at the University Bradford, and that was where I had my undergrad. So I just went straight on from the undergrad into masters. And reflections, I would say that sometimes I failed to appreciate that for a master's, there was going to be like a significant jump in the amount of complexity of a material. I mean, yes, as you progress during undergrad, you do expect like a bit of a difficulty and all, but I think I failed to appreciate on time the sort of difficulty in the jump. And so, yeah, I think there was a bit of a struggle with that. And then I think maintaining a time management, because there was a lot more demands for work that wasn't really standardized exams, like just write exams and all of that, but a lot of project work and interdisciplinary work and teamwork. So trying to manage all of that within that time frame, it took a while to sort of get into the hang of it. And I did have some personal events that also did impact on my performance during that time. And I think I feel to appreciate the kind of help I could get access to, because I remember one of the my lecturers, I mentioned some things that had happened. So he had not complained, but in a conversation with my supervisor, my MSc supervisor, who was also my undergrad supervisor, he had mentioned that there was just something about me. And then I said, oh yeah, I did have some personal events that affected me. And they were like, so why didn't you say it? So it's not like you're going to be given an excuse, but if there were extenuating circumstances that did have an impact on your performance and all of that, then something could have been done. Like it would have given like a different perspective. So I would say making use of that, not as a cop-out, but if you have genuine concerns, I think UFG has like a good cause, thing that you could claim, and you would ask for evidence, because such system can be prone to abuse if not checked. Well, if you do have some things that are beyond your control that have happened and that could have had an impact, please take on use that. That's there for the reason, but please do not abuse the system. So yes, failing to appreciate the difficulty, and also I would say that reflecting, reaching out for help, because to an extent in undergrad you can do with a lot of good work and all of that, and that's fine. But because for a master's there can be an appreciable increase in sort of the gap and the complexity. And yeah, so if you have postgrads or PhD students, for example, researchers and postdocs that are in your lab that you could talk to, just reach out and ask for help. A lot of them are willing to help if we give you a bit of time, all of that. And we didn't have anything, well, I didn't know, I wouldn't say we don't have like the SLD, but also what we do have here. So please reach out. We have the one-on-one and various appointments and drop-in sessions that the SLD organizes that are really worthwhile. Sometimes reflecting back, I wish I had something like the SLD. I think it would really have come in handy, but yeah, the resources are there. Please make use of that. And I would say, do not be quiet, like ask for help, and appreciate that it's a journey and that you're gonna grow as you get exposed to a lot of things, and sometimes realize that growth is not always comfortable, but then sometimes there is a reward that comes with that, because at the end of the day, like, it's going to be your degree, and it's probably the most substantial academic work that you would undergo, especially with your project compared to sort of your history. I know somebody who said that coming from a medical background, did like a master's in public or global health, and they didn't really have experience in academic writing. And the person was reflecting on how the SLD really, really came in handy, and the project work they were really, really proud of it, even several years down the line, because that was the kind of first time they did an academic work on such scale. But that would not have been the experience if that person did not reach out to the SLD, for example, did not reach out for help in academic writing, and then see how that help panned out to be in a work that you're really proud of many years ago, so many years later. So definitely reach out and ask for help. And then I know we struggle with this and all of that, but please don't keep things last minute. It's not easy. It needs a lot of organization and intentionality and planning ahead, but try not to keep things last minute. A lot of times deadlines are strict, so try and plan your time and all of that against the deadlines and all. And sometimes we think, oh, maybe one day before the deadline, we can get what we need to get done. Sometimes it happens, but it doesn't always, because sometimes tech just decides to take a break from you at a very inconvenient time. So just as much as is possible, avoid circumstances that could impact on the performance, especially if things go out of control. So being proactive with some of it. So I would say, yes, those are some of my reflections as a PGT. Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Lydia. Yeah, I think that's one of the key points. I think if I know not all the panelists here were in our morning session, but one of the things that a lot of the students mentioned when we're talking about the different facets of mastersness, we talked about as a team that we felt that well-being is such an important part of being a master's student, that if you're not feeling at your best, you're not going to perform as well as you can as a student. And we know particularly once you hit postgraduate level, you're more of an adult and you have a lot more things going on, and it's possible that you're living in a different country, and it can be difficult and there can be challenges. But the important thing is that if you are finding yourself struggling with anything, that it is important that you say, I'm not really understanding this. Can you give me some help? That going to someone, whether it's your course convener, whether it's your advisor of studies, or whether it's making an appointment with us at SLD, it's very much something that you should do. And of course, we do have our session on Thursday as well with the wellbeing and counselling team, who again will give you some tools, techniques and tips and ideas for how to kind of manage that wellbeing as well, and where to go if you need some help with that. So all really, really good points. So I think at this point, I would just like to thank our panelists. All really good insights. Hopefully you found that incredibly useful. I wish I could have heard all of this before I started my master's, so hopefully you feel the same there. So what we're going to do now is I will just flip the screen over and we'll say goodbye to our GTA panelists and hello to our SLD staff panel members, and we will take your questions that you've asked via Mentimeter. So we'll switch over there. Just give me 1 second to switch my screen, and then I'll invite up our panel of SLD advisors, ELAs and staff members, and we'll just introduce ourselves briefly, and then we'll start working through our questions. But thanks once again to our GTA panelists. Really, really appreciate you taking the time to come along and give us the benefit of your insight today. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to our questions now. Hopefully you've had time to add your questions. If not, if you're watching along live, you can see the Menti code still at the top of the screen and the QR code there. So do continue to add questions as we go along, and we will do our very best as a panel to answer. So if I can just get the SLD staff who have joined our panel now to just briefly introduce themselves so everyone knows who everyone is. I can start because I think you've heard enough of me talking today and most people should know who I am. But I'm Dr. Stuart Purcell and I am the Induction and Transitions Manager. So I'll just get my two colleagues who you've met already as well, Lucy and Claire, to introduce themselves, starting with Claire.
Hi everyone, I'm Claire Brown, and as Stuart said, I'm one of the two induction and transitions advisors based within SLD. Casey McCormick, and I am the other induction and transitions advisor in SLD.
And if we can go with just the order that's on my screen next then, so we'll go with Scott, who some of you will have also met today.
Hi, I'm one of the two deputy heads of student learning development, and my team is the scientific team and maths and stats. So there's only looking around at the rest of the participants here. There's only one other one from my sub team here who you'll hear from in a second.
So we'll go with Jenny next then, since Scott has name checked Jenny.
Hi, so I'm Jenny August and I'm the maths advisor in student learning development. So it's my job to help students from across the university with any of the maths that they need for their studies.
Thank you, Jenny. And then we'll go next to Scott's equivalent in the team, Jennifer, on the other side of the team.
Hi there, I'm Jennifer and I'm the Deputy Head of SLD for arts, humanities, social sciences, and international students. So as Stuart said, Scots equivalent, but for the non-sciencey subjects.
And then last but not least, we'll go with Aleix, who's part of Jennifer's team.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Aleix Turovecino, and I am the Effective Learning Advisor for the College of Social Sciences. This means that I support and help develop students that study in that college, in the College of Social Sciences here at the university.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, everyone. So what we'll do is we'll just work through the questions and I'll do my best to sort of compare, if you will, and I will maybe direct the questions to panelists. However, if anyone wants to say something that I have missed or would like to add to a particular question or respond, just put your hand up and I will hopefully see you if I just extend my pictures here. Let me just do that first so I can actually see everyone. Okay. Can't quite see everyone, so if I don't see you, put your hand up, just unmute and speak. Okay. So, first question, we've got quite a lot to get through, so we'll try and keep it to one response per question as we go through. But how are we graded? What counts as an A or a distinction? Well, the first thing I can say before I pass this on to anyone else who wants to just briefly answer it is that we'll actually have sessions on this tomorrow. So your first session tomorrow morning is called Assessment and Feedback in Your College. So that will discuss the university grading scale, and that will talk about these different grades that you can get in your subject, as well as the different types of feedback that you can get. But does anyone want to give a quick answer from a college perspective here around the grading, or are we happy just to kind of pass on? Scott?
The description of an A grade at the University of Glasgow has 3 parts. Exemplary range and depth of attainment of intended learning outcomes. So can you achieve the intended learning outcomes? Can you achieve all of them? And can you be the model student? Secured by a discriminating command of a comprehensive range of relevant materials and analyses. So that's the bit that says if you can demonstrate that you've done further reading, then you get more credit. Thirdly, and by deployment of considered judgment relating to key issues, concepts, and procedures. So that's the bit that says if you can critically analyze and describe why you've put those pieces in, then again, you're on back for a higher grade. So that's technically the answer to how you get an A. And as Stuart says, we'll probably go into that in more detail in your subject-specific version tomorrow.
I really hope that you were reading that off the page, Scott, and don't just have that memorized, but I'm not sure if you don't just have it memorized.
I've been reading that out to students since 2012, and it's my favorite piece of university jargon.
Fantastic. But yeah, as Scott said, and as I said, the main thing here, if you're not sure about the grading system, you're new to the University of Glasgow, we have quite a specific grading system, but do either attend tomorrow morning's session or watch the recordings back. Those sessions will be recorded. That will answer any questions you have around grading and actually, more importantly, thinking about your development, how to use feedback effectively as a postgraduate student. Excellent. Thank you, Scott. No, I haven't. What's happening? There we go. I always forget how Menti works and I haven't used it for a while. Okay, so how do you read effectively for a master's course and how is it different from UG? So we might have a couple of different subjective perspectives on this here. So maybe would someone from the arts side, there would Jennifer or Aleix, arts and social sciences, like to maybe start us off here?
I'm happy to go. So I suppose one of the main differences that you have when it comes to reading between an undergraduate degree and a postgraduate degree, it has 2 parts. It has to do with the volume of the reading, and it has to do with the complexity of the reading, where you'll be asked to engage with more complicated, more complex materials at this level. Something that I learned from Stuart when I started this post was that one of the best strategies to approach your reading at this level is to be, in Stuart's words, strategic and systematic. What does this mean? This means that it's important for you to understand that you will be given a bunch of reading to do for each of your courses. It's important, first of all, to distinguish between what reading is completely compulsory for you to do and what reading is for you to develop further. And you might want to delve in if that's a topic that you're interested in for one of your assignments, for example, and use your time strategically with those. And the second part also is that when you are doing research, you want to use your time wisely and use the different aspects of academic literature that are there that allow you to see or understand what an article, a book, or a chapter is about without necessarily reading the whole thing. And so learn whether something is going to be relevant for you in your research before having to invest your time in reading carefully a piece of literature. For those of you that are in the College of Social Sciences and come to my workshop tomorrow, we will be talking about this in more detail. But this involves paying attention to abstracts in academic articles, to the introductions, to keywords, to indexes, to get a sense of whether something is relevant for you or not. And only once something is relevant, then decide to invest your time into a more in-depth reading, which you will have to do of several articles, several books. But it's always being intentional and being strategic in the way that you approach the volume of reading.
That's great. Thank you very much, Aleix. Would anyone like to add anything to that from the sciences side, either Scott or Jenny?
Just to quickly add, from an arts perspective as well, you'll be meeting Dr. Robin Calver, who is Aleix's equivalent, but for the College of Arts, and she'll be talking about that as well, the idea of strategic reading, which is really important and sometimes tricky in arts because we don't always have abstracts. So you need to come up with other strategies and other ways to figure out whether a piece of work is going to be useful for you and whether that's something you want to spend time on. So you'll be able to talk more to Robin about that later this week.
Thank you, Jennifer. Jenny, were you going to add something as well? Yeah.
Yeah, so I come from a maths background, and one of the things I found going from my undergrad to my master's, well, one was a lot more complex stuff as well, similar to on the art side. But I also had to cope with the fact that I changed universities between my undergrad and my master's. So there were some things now, like gaps in my knowledge, where I hadn't been taught this in my undergrad and I needed to know it for my master's. So it comes back, I think, to the strategic thing that Aleix and Jennifer were talking about. But in terms of being prepared sometimes to take things on faith, you want to go back and fill all the gaps, but sometimes there's just not time. So be prepared that sometimes you're just going to have to say, okay, I'm going to need to take that as a black box for now until I've got time to go back and fix that. And also to just be much more independent about your reading. So as an undergrad, I basically read my lecture notes. So what I was directly given by the person standing at the front of the lecture. For my master's, I had to start going and looking elsewhere. For instance, they didn't always cover all the details in the lectures, so I needed to go and find it in a book to get the details that I wasn't understanding, or to fill those gaps that I had as well. So I think that's there was another difference for me from undergrad to master's.
Great, thanks, Jenny. I think in the interest I'll move on, but again, a few really key important points there to pick up on. So how do I, or what can I do to prepare myself for university as a mature student returning to academia after a long break? Does anyone in particular want to grab at this one?
Can I jump in on this one, Stuart?
Yeah, of course, Claire.
So I think it's quite easy as a mature student coming back to study to feel a bit of imposter syndrome, to feel that maybe you don't belong, you've forgotten how it all works, you maybe struggle to make that transition. I think focusing on your strengths, on what you've done, that's all that life experience you might have had in that gap when you haven't been studying, is actually really valuable, and maybe thinking of academia as another professional environment. Maybe you've been in a profession before, or you've had other experiences that you can draw on. So I think just feeling that, reminding yourself that you should be here, you belong here, you're welcome here, and you maybe have to do a little bit of work to get yourself back into that mindset, but you've got an awful lot to offer. Yeah, I think that's my answer.
Can I offer a mature student perspective on this as well, if that's all right?
You absolutely can, Lucy.
So I returned to do my master's at Glasgow after 10 years out. And something I found really useful was the Mature Students Association here. So it's a lovely little house just opposite the gym. They've got their own kitchen. They've got really cheap tea and coffee. They've got a space to store your belongings. It's full of other mature students. And it was a really, really great place for me to find community. I think I definitely probably over worried about feeling rusty for the reason that Claire picked up on, because I think when you're coming back and you've had some time in a workplace, it is much easier to go, okay, so my tutors feel a little bit more like maybe a good line manager, and I know how to navigate that relationship. And I think that's something that we'll touch on in the relationships and communication session tomorrow. But you do have a lot of transferable skills and experience to bring to the academic space for sure.
That's great. Thanks, Lucy. I would also just very briefly add before we move on that the fact that you're here at Transition to Glasgow Postgrad edition is a really good step as well, that hopefully this course will help you gain a bit of confidence in terms of university itself, but absolutely everything that Claire and Lucy said there absolutely applies. So thank you very much, panel, again. So next up, since I'm not a native English speaker, my vocabulary is not as broad as I would like it to be, hence I sometimes use AI to use synonyms instead of the simpler words I have used. Is that a problem? So I think I might have to throw this one to Scott to start off with, since Scott has just talked about AI and academic integrity in the previous session. So Scott, would you be okay to start off with this one?
Yeah, sure. I think the safer way to do this is to use other tools that are not artificial intelligence to specifically look up alternatives to the words that you're interested in replacing. Part of becoming a more qualified student in a language that's not your native language is also learning the new vocabulary, right? So it's important that you recognize where your vocabulary could be more academic, and it's great that you want to learn those new things. The danger with taking a whole paragraph and then putting it through AI to say, make this sound more academic, is that it can make bigger changes to the things that you're trying to say. It can maybe make the argument in a way that you're not yet capable of making. And if that's the case, then you're presenting something to the university that you have not done the intellectual workload for. And that's where it becomes a problem for us, because we need to be able to assess your understanding, your critical ability. I would say don't use artificial intelligence, use a thesaurus. An online thesaurus is totally fine. Like, you can still do this digitally, but be very, 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 very careful about taking the whole paragraph, putting it through and saying, making it sound more academic. Right? That's really, to put it plainly, that's academic misconduct. So I'll finish by saying I still applaud your efforts to improve your vocabulary, right? This is something that you should be doing.
Can I also just add something as a languages person? So this is from the perspective of somebody that studied different languages and wrote academically in a language that wasn't mine, and also from someone who was based in the School of Modern Languages and Cultures. I think Scott is entirely right. Using online thesauruses and dictionaries is a really useful tool, but also do reach out to the international effective learning advisors here. There's a session within T2G Postgrad on academic English. There's also, within the School of Modern Languages and Cultures, there are ongoing sessions that they run specifically for developing your academic English skills. Look also at studying together with other international students. That can often be one of the most effective ways to improve your own language skills. Lean on those resources rather than the AI side, I would say.
There's also, just referring to the international learning advisors that Lucy just mentioned, they run classes throughout semester as well, and one is specifically on how you can use your academic reading to build up your academic vocabulary and to work on your tone. So there's a whole load of resources out there for you to access throughout term as well.
Yep, thank you, everyone. Just to reiterate something we've kind of said in other sessions, that I know we talked about the workshop just there. I know that some of you have tried to sign up for the workshop, so we obviously have a limited capacity. We have so many of you here to attend this course, which is fantastic, but we're quite a small team, so being able to run workshops, we're kind of limited in the amount of spaces we have. But when we talked about there being emails coming out in the new semester with opportunities to engage with similar classes and similar workshops, that's what Jennifer's talking about there in terms of what our international effective learning advisors do. So even if you can't sign up to the workshop on T2G Postgrad this week, please do look out in your emails. There will be an email coming out early in the new semester about those classes that Jennifer was mentioning just there. And in terms of the English for Academic Studies classes that Lucy mentioned, well, actually, what we should do is put a link to those on our T2G Postgrad Moodle. So we'll do that to make sure they're flagged up as well, so you know where to find out more information about those. So thank you very much, everyone. I think that's a good answer to that one there. So will the recordings for the international ELA sessions on Wednesday be made available to us after the fact? The sign-ups were already full, so I apologise that this is very much picking up on the topic that I've just said there. So unfortunately, no, the sessions will not be recorded because they're workshop sessions. So I think we've explained this in a few of the sessions already today, that because they'll involve student interaction, we're not recording those sessions because it would mean students being on camera and it's a privacy issue. So we will not be recording those sessions. But as I said, we will be running more international student sessions in the new semester covering very similar material as Jennifer just alluded to there. So please do look out in your emails for your college effective learning advisor being in touch and the international effective learning advisors being in touch in the new semester with timetables for classes. So in short, unfortunately, no, of these classes will not be recorded, but very similar classes will be running that you can attend, that are open for you to attend in the new semester. So please look out for those emails. Okay, so I'm now considering renewing my laptop. Do you have any recommendations for students' laptops, especially for students who'll be using stats programs like R? Now, I'm wishing our stats advisor George was here to answer this question, but he's not. So I'm going to see perhaps if Scott or Jenny have any kind of major points they want to raise here without getting into Windows versus Mac slagging match.
I don't know much about different types of laptops or anything, but what I do know is that R should be fine running on just about anything. So I wouldn't worry too much about it and on that process, like on that side of things, unless you're running huge, big programs, in which case you probably know much more about computers than I do and have a better idea. I don't know if Scott has something more helpful, but R itself is not it's something that it's not a specialist thing that you'll need a specialist computer to be able to run.
Thanks, Jenny. And I'll just pass on to Scott. He's posted a little link in the chat for everyone here on Zoom, but we can flag this up on the Moodle as well for anyone on YouTube.
Yeah, if you use the IT web pages, which are just available at gla.ac.uk/IT, click the student link. You'll also find information on the laptop loan scheme. So there are lockers on campus where you can use you basically swap your student card for a laptop for 4 hours at a time and then swap it back. So if you're ever stuck, you can use that too.
I think my only point about laptop buying as a student as well is just reading a lot of reviews for different laptops and just figuring out what you need. A lot of the time you don't need something, as Jenny was saying, that's the most powerful laptop in the world. And do remember, as Scott was saying there, even if you're not borrowing a laptop, the university does have a really large range of computers that are available on campus. So again, just be making sure that you're not buying something you don't necessarily need to spend money on. Yeah, okay, good, thank you. And yep, Scott has posted that in YouTube as well. So thank you very much for that, Scott. Are there any careers opportunities like RA-ships or TA-ships open to students of PGT programs? I know they're open to MRes and PhD students, but would love to apply as I serve as a dependent for my family. This is a really, again, yeah, absolutely understandable perspective. I'm not super aware of many PGT programs that do offer this, but perhaps someone else in the panel might know more about it than me if anyone's sure about this. But on the whole, it tends to be you have to be in a PhD program to be doing GTA teaching. It doesn't apply to every single subject. Each individual subject might have its own roles and stipulations. I would say that's something to ask in your subject or your school when you start your course. I've heard of certain quite specific programs where master's students can maybe teach undergrad students, but it's not something that happens across the board. It's much more common that your GTAs will be a PhD student or an MRes student rather than a taught postgraduate student. I don't know if anyone else knows anything differently from me, or is that a reasonable answer?
Maybe not related to RA ships and TA ships, but there were a couple of questions further down about careers opportunities more generally, and it's worth flagging that the university has a career service and that there are careers people in each of the colleges as well. They run events throughout the years. I think there was a question about job fairs as well. And I'll pop into the chat now. There's a calendar of events and job fairs that the career services runs throughout the year. So you can look at that. You can speak with them. You can attend those fairs if you're interested in thinking about your career after university or also finding out opportunities whilst you are studying here.
Thanks, Alish. And thankfully, you're also advertising one of our speakers on Thursday, that we will have the careers, employability and opportunities team speaking on Thursday as well. So hopefully they'll be able to talk a bit more about those sort of opportunities that Alish is mentioning there as well.
And just to say, I think the career service has an internship hub, so that specifically is for internships. I don't know who they're available to, but it exists as the hub.
I think you've reminded me of something they literally put on their bullet points that they're going to cover in their session, Jenny. So thank you very much for that. And when you were talking, I'm like, that feels familiar, I think, because I literally wrote that up in their blurb for their session. So they will be talking about that, I think, on Thursday as well. So thanks very much, Jenny. Yeah, again, I know we are very aware. I know that you all want to come to the workshops. We just don't have enough people to be able to run bigger workshops than we currently have. Already opened up the capacity a bit more because we know there's so much demand. But again, as we've said, don't worry. This is not your only opportunity to engage with our international ELAs. There will be emails coming out at the start of semester for classes and workshops and additional sessions. So apologies that if you haven't been able to sign up for the workshops. I know it would be ideal if you could, but we are limited in terms of space. But again, it's not the only chance you'll have to engage. So don't worry at all. There will be lots more chances to engage in the new semester with our international effective learning advisors. Okay, what referencing style is recommended in our essays? I feel like I know the answer to this one, but I've been speaking quite a lot. So maybe one of the college ELAs or college people might want to answer this one.
Sure, I can give it a go as the ELA that probably is dealing more with academic writing and referencing. So the style of referencing will largely depend on the course that you're studying and on the program that you're in. Here at Glasgow, we don't have a single referencing style that the whole of the university adheres to, but it varies a little bit depending on what subject you're studying, what college you're studying, what particular school you're studying in. It's very important that you get that information as early on as possible. And usually you'll be able to get this from the course handbook. Your course handbook should specify what is the recommended referencing style for that particular course. And if you learn that as early as possible, you can get information on how to reference properly for that course. Worth mentioning in relation to that the library has a resource on their website that we developed together with them, where you can find information on how to reference on all the major referencing styles used at the university. So if you just go to the library website, they have a section on referencing, and there you have how to reference on IPA, MLA, Harvard, MHRA, and Chicago, and I'm probably missing one or two. But whatever your style is, the information is there, and you just need to follow that. There's lots of examples as well on how to reference the different sources. And if you still have doubts after that, you can contact us. You can make an appointment with the ELA, and we can talk about referencing with you, no problem.
Thanks very much, Alish. Jennifer just posted it in the chat for those people on Zoom, but actually Andrew and Scott also discussed this in the previous academic integrity session. So you'll also find a link to it on the slides from the academic integrity session right at the end when they talk about additional resources. Fantastic, thank you. I need tips on how to master academic writing. Will the SLD team provide a platform for students to get their work reviewed? Now, I feel this is something else that might have to go over to the ELAs. Maybe Jennifer, do you want to maybe pick up on this one?
Well, there's the word review, so you can meet definitely with effective learning advisors for a one-to-one appointment and talk over your work. What they won't do is look over an entire draft and give you feedback in the same way one of your tutors would. And they also don't proofread work either, just because, as you can see, we're quite a small team and there are many thousands of students. But you can definitely come along and talk through ideas, or maybe if you've got some ideas about structure or some questions about structure, you can talk through that, talk through things like style and flow, and that's on top of the classes that we mentioned that run right across the academic year. So there is definitely a platform, and that can be in that group setting, or that can be in a one-to-one basis. But make sure as well, if you're going to take advantage of one of those appointments, maybe send the learning advisor you'll be seeing your work in advance, or an excerpt of your work in advance, so they can have it in front of them before the meeting starts.
Yep, ideal. Thanks, Jennifer. And just to be clear that applies to both sides. So if whether you're studying a sciences subject or in the arts and humanities and social sciences, you can absolutely make an appointment with us and discuss your writing, but the same applies. We don't really review your work for you or proofread your work, but you can absolutely get in touch with your effective learning advisor and they will give you advice on writing and what kind of standards we're looking for at academic level, as well as those classes that we've mentioned. Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, I think we've kind of answered this one earlier. So the grading metrics used by the university, we have quite a specific grading system, but rather than talk through it all here at length, what I'd advise is whoever asked this question or anyone who's interested in the answer to this question, either comes along tomorrow morning to the class for your specific college on assessment and feedback, or indeed watch that recording for your college later once the recording is available. We'll talk through that in much more detail, so there's not as much value as talking through it here when there'll be a whole class on the university's grading and how that operates tomorrow. So just in the interest of time, we'll skip past this one. We've still got quite a few questions to get through in the time we have. I don't know if I know the answer to this. Does anyone else know the answer to this? Is the library open 24/7? I can look it up on the website, but if anyone knows the answer off the top of their head, Alish.
I'm pretty sure it's the answer. The answer is no for most of the year. It will be open 7 days a week, but it will close at different times throughout the year. It will be open 24/7 for those times when it's like revision, for example, when you're preparing for exams. So there's maybe a month or a month and a half in semester 1 and then in semester 2 where the library is open 24/7. But then the rest of the time it's not open 24/7. And I think it starts by closing at 9 or 10, and then it extends until midnight or something like that. And then for maybe a few weeks, it's 24/7.
So I've just literally opened up the library website as you were speaking. So as Alish says, there are times of the year when it's open, I think all the way around in exam times when it's open 24 hours, but most of the year it's open Monday to Sunday, so 7 days a week. The library opens at 7:15 in the morning, and it closes at 2 a.m. Now, that doesn't mean that the library staff are working all of those hours. The library staff will work from 8 in the morning till 8 at night. So that means you can access the library from 7:15 till 2 a.m. But if you want to use or speak to any members of staff, you can still take books out. A lot of that is it's a self-scan system to remove books from the library, so you don't have to worry about staff being there to let you do that. But if you do have any queries or you're not sure about anything, then you need to have the staff there as well. But Scott, you've got your hand up to add something as well.
It's worth pointing out that as the department responsible for talking to students about good academic approaches, we wouldn't recommend that you design your life around studying 24/7 in the library. So this isn't the time to go into details about time management, but that's a lot of the things that is a big thing that we talk about. And when you see us as your course goes on, we'll talk to you about more useful approaches. It is good to know, though, that if you have an emergency or you have other things in your life and the only time you can literally go to drop off a book is at 3 o'clock in the morning, that there are times in the year when you can do that.
Yeah, it's a very good point, Scott. I think Claire touched on that very much earlier in our time management and workload session. And again, this is why we talked about well-being in quite a lot of the course so far, and why it's one of the facets that we've talked about, that trying to not be in the library at 2 AM very often is quite a good plan. Excellent. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay. I'm a Muslim. Can you please describe the situation in Glasgow right now regarding the riots that happened recently in the UK? So, of course, this is something that I imagine a lot of people are quite concerned about. I'm not sure if anyone has a really strong opinion or something they want to say here in response to this.
I think I've seen something in my inbox. So I've just come back from annual leave, and the university sent an email just on the 5th of August, which is quite typical of the way the university deals with sort of public interest or large national scale events like this, saying that the university is here to support you in many, many ways. One of the sentences here says, on behalf of the university, I would like to remind all students, and this is from the principal, remind all students and colleagues that we're here to provide reassurance and support 24/7. Anyone who needs urgent help should call, and then there's the usual list of emergency contacts for the university. So I say this only because this is a good example of how the university takes responsibility to students seriously, but actually Scotland has essentially seen no unrest of the type that we've seen elsewhere nationally. And I think the trend is that the riots and counter protests are dwindling out now. So if you're concerned at all, I would say I don't think that you need to be at the moment. And I think the media is very good at taking situations that have happened in very discrete places and making them seem like they're much more commonplace than actually they really are. So I think if I was in your position, number one, I wouldn't be worried. And number two, the university is here to look out for you, and there are people that you can contact should you ever want to talk to someone.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I think from someone who's again lives here and follows the news here, what we've seen much more in Glasgow rather than actually the riots and protests from people in the far right. It's been much more counter protests that we've seen where people have come out in support of anyone and everyone, and being a welcoming community and welcoming city here in Glasgow. So as Scott said, hopefully it isn't something that you have to worry about. I understand the concerns, but as Scott said as well, the university is very much here to support you. So if you do have any concerns, it is something you can get in touch with the university about if you need to. But as Scott said as well, we'll maybe try and post a link to that announcement as well, if that helps, on the Moodle, just to say that the university is aware of this and is here to support you through this as well. We understand that it can cause concerns, but hopefully that answers the question as briefly as we possibly can in such a kind of difficult issue. Okay. So I wonder if there's a job fair on campus before we graduate. If we have an internship, do you allow students to work part-time off campus? So I think the easy answer to the first part is yes, there's usually many job fairs. Again, this is something that is not something that's really our area of responsibility within SLD, but that the Careers, Employability and Opportunities team will talk a lot more about, I'm sure, on in their session on Thursday. So again, if you can come along to that, do come along. Otherwise, do watch the recording back, because that session will be recorded. In terms of part-time work off campus, I don't know if this is something that comes up more in the sciences, but in terms of part-time work off campus, I think it depends on your course in terms of what sort of timetable that you're going to have. So again, depends on the type of internship, if that's something that you're doing that's part of your course or not part of your course, whether that's actually incorporated. And that's something, if you're not sure what your timetable is going to look like at this point, that's something to contact your course convener or the person on your course that you're applying to, whatever the contact email address is for that. If you need to know what your timetable is going to look like in terms of you planning to work part-time, And obviously that might apply to anyone who just has to work part-time, might not be an internship, but you might just have a part-time job. Then that's something that you have to think about your course timetable and planning around that potentially. So it is something to speak to your subject about in terms of what your timetable might look like. Is that a reasonable answer? Does everyone want to add anything else to what I've just said? No, perfect. So we can move on then. People, there is a theme developing. We have increased the capacity. I don't know if this was before or after this message was sent. We've increased the capacity on the workshops that we could increase the capacity. So hopefully you've been able to find a space. And once again, if you haven't, we are really sorry. It's not because we don't want to. It's not because we're not trying to. It's that we are a small team and we're limited in how much we can do with the size of the team we have. But once again, this isn't the only opportunity you will have to engage with us and engage with your effective learning advisor for your college, or the international effective learning advisors, or the maths and stats advisors. There will be many more chances to engage with them in the first semester, and you will absolutely hear more about that soon. So hopefully that answers that one again. How is it from going from one university as an undergrad to a different university as a postgrad? Anyone like to jump in and give a bit of their own experience on that?
Yeah, so I went from one university. I was still in the UK, but went from one university to another for my master's. And as I sort of alluded to before, part of what that means, particularly I guess on the sciences side, where there's very much a sort of prerequisite building up of knowledge, means that sometimes the courses that you did don't necessarily match up with what was done at undergrad there. So you'll find yourself having to maybe fill some gaps as you go along. Other than that, a lot of things were very similar. There were differences, and in some cases. So I joined a program where some people had continued on from undergraduate, so had that element of trying to integrate into a cohort that already existed, which can be on the harder side because everyone's already got their friendship groups and things like that. But all in all, like, it was the same idea of join some clubs, join some societies, get stuck in, and yeah, it wasn't so different, I don't think.
Great, thanks, Jenny. Anyone else want to add a quick bit of perspective before we move on? Alish?
Can I pop in? Yes. So I studied my undergraduate degrees in another university and another country, in Spain. And then I moved for my master's degree to Scotland, to the University of Edinburgh. For those of you that might be making a jump from a different academic culture, one of the things that I found perhaps most remarkable of coming to study here was the amount of free time that you can have. The study here, we work on the basis of promoting independent learning a lot. So you will obviously have lectures and tutorials and labs and all the things, but you will also have a lot of time where you will have to manage your own time and your own study. This was not the case for me in my undergraduate degree, where nearly every hour of my day was covered by a class, and the system resembled much more a kind of like high school type system. So if you have not experienced this degree of freedom of managing your time before, it can be a little bit of a challenge to start with, to know yourself, know how you work best, know how you allocate your own resources and your own time to complete all the coursework, which will be quite a lot that you will have to do. And I would encourage you to start thinking about this as soon as possible, and to try and start testing what works for you, what doesn't work for you, because this was definitely the biggest challenge for me coming here. But once I had that mastered, I really enjoyed it, and I think it's a very positive sort of like way of learning, because it allows you to know yourself, know how you work, take ownership of your own learning, and you actually get a lot out of it.
Great, thanks, Alish. So I think, in interest of time, we'll move on to the next question. Any advice on where to find sessions outside your immediate curriculum that may be related or unrelated to your line of study, e.g. seminars, conferences, and talks? So I think there's a few different ways of interpreting this. There's one that we can maybe answer in terms of our own provision. And I think the other interpretation here might be around finding perhaps conferences and so forth that relate to potentially your subject. So I don't know if anyone wants to particularly jump in any of those.
So your school, or at least this is how it worked in maths, your school will probably have regular seminars happening on various different topics. And so if you're interested in getting to know kind of what's going on in the research in the area that you're interested in, the best thing to do is speak to your lecturers, speak to the people running your courses at the moment and ask them, are there seminars running in your school that you can go along to? Because most of the time they'll be very happy for you to come and sit in the back of a seminar and try and follow along or get something out of it. So speak to them. They'll know all about what's happening in your school, and then we'll generally be quite happy for you to come along if you're interested.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. One thing I could add to this in terms of those conferences, and for me, it was also just looking for journal articles and things that were being published in my area. One of the things I did during my master's and my PhD was to use an RSS reader. So this is basically a tool that you can download as part of your browser, like basically a plugin for your browser. That means that when you're perhaps reading an academic article, and then you read a few academic articles and you realize that quite a few of the ones that you're particularly interested in terms of research have been published by maybe one or two different journals, the same journal time and time again. So it might be the Journal of Media Studies, for example. So what you could then do is go to the Journal of Media Studies website, and using this RSS reader, you basically subscribe to that website. So when a new journal article or a new journal issue is published, you get a little notification in your browser. And what that would also do is flag up if that journal was promoting some sort of conference or some sort of talk that you could go to. That would provide that update there, and it works for websites as well. So again, if you find a sort of academic discussion group website or a blog that relates to the kind of industries that you might want to go and work in, again, anytime the website is updated with anything, you get a little notification. So I found that really useful in sort of keeping up to date with what was being published and what was happening sort of in my research field. So that was another tool that I used there as well. Anyone else want to add anything briefly before we move on here? No? Okay, perfect. Is there any help or guidance on finding a job after graduation? Again, we've sort of touched on this, so we can answer this one quite briefly. That again, this is something that our Careers, Employability and Opportunities Service can absolutely help you with. So again, do come along to their session on Thursday, or indeed watch the recording here, and they'll tell you a lot more about what they do. And there's a link to their website as well in our program brochure that you can have a look at. But the short answer here, yes, there is help. The Q&A forum, okay, I saw this one earlier. There is no text box to begin a submission. So if you do want to ask a question outside of one of the sessions, then what you have to do is click the Add Discussion Post button. I've added this to the description on Moodle, so hopefully it makes much more sense now. It is just Moodle being a little bit awkward, but all you do is you add a post. That's basically you asking a question, and then we can respond to that there. So that's how that works. I want to learn more about developing analytical reading as part of my course, and my course expects me to think more critically and form different opinions. I also want to learn how to write essays more analytically. So I think we've kind of discussed this a little bit earlier, but maybe Alish, as the person who was discussing this earlier, just a really quick answer here to perhaps flag up sessions and resources.
Yeah, so the first one is that if by any chance you're in the College of Social Sciences, please do come to the workshop tomorrow, because we will be talking about this in a little bit of like an overview. But really the important sessions to keep an eye for are the sessions that we run throughout the year. We have a course on essay writing, a course on criticality, and a course also on dissertations, which talk you through the stages of precisely how to read and write critically for each of those types of assessments or types of skills that you need to develop in your course. So if you are interested in this, please do keep an eye, check our website, and keep an eye for the emails that we will be sending out with the sessions that we organize, and do try to come. The resources are also there in the Moodle, so if you cannot come to the session, you will always be able to see the resource with the recording or class slides.
That's great, thanks, Aleix. And yeah, we've already linked to SLD website very much in our on the Moodle. But again, this is something you will get an email about this. This is where I've said before, do not ignore this email. Anything from SLD, do have a look at. We only send you emails when we really have to, when we're offering our resources out. So that's definitely something to not ignore when it comes through. So what would you suggest to help postgraduate students adapt quicker to their new learning environment in U of G? I usually experience a slow start when put in such a situation. So the very first quick answer to this, and I would pass over to either be Lucy or Claire to take a bit more here. But the first thing I would say is that the fact that you're here at Transitions to Glasgow Postgrad Edition is hopefully something that will help you. We really do hope this course will help, because it's exactly what this course is for, to give you a bit of an understanding of what we're looking for at master's level and a little bit more about how the University of Glasgow more specifically works. But Claire or Lucy, do you want to add maybe something on there as well?
Sure. So I think a lot of this revolves around pinpointing where you're transitioning from, and what effect that might have on where you're transitioning to. So thinking about what are you used to and what are the factors at Glasgow that might be different and might become challenging as a result. So whether you're transitioning just from another university within the UK, or you're coming from a different academic tradition, and then that can kind of help you to work out which areas of support you might most benefit from engaging with. So as Stuart said, T2G Postgrad is a great place to start with that, but also just overall go easy on yourself. I think any transition of any kind can be really tricky, and getting used to the step up from undergraduate to postgraduate is tricky for everybody, even when they've done their whole academic career here. So I think, yeah, engaging with the course, working out where those most tricky areas will be, and then looking for the support accordingly, but being really easy on yourself.
Ideal, thanks, Lucy. Perfect. So I think we'll just do a couple more in the interest of time here. So how would you respond to an international postgraduate student who seems to lose his morality, motivation, or spirit in his study? Is it okay for him to feel discouraged at this postgraduate study level? I think, again, very quick answer, it's absolutely okay to feel like this, that obviously postgraduate study level, as we've talked about quite a lot, is a big jump up, and particularly as an international student, which a few of the panel already talked about, that this is a challenge, and we're very aware that it's a challenge. And I think one thing I'll just say before I open this up more broadly is that something that Lydia said earlier, one of our GTAs, was talking about asking for help when you feel like things aren't when you're not feeling great about something, or you're feeling like you're losing your motivation, or you're just struggling with some work. The thing to do is tell someone. Obviously, first of all, that could be someone that could be your course convener, that could be discussing it with your advisor of studies, or that could indeed be the wellbeing team and the counselling team that, again, will be here on Thursday to talk more about how you engage with them. So the main thing here for me is to not suffer in silence, and to tell someone that you're maybe struggling and look for that help. But I don't know if anyone else would like to speak more specifically about this beyond what I've said. Jenny?
I just wanted to add how important it is that you speak to other people on your course, because I know from experience that you can feel as if you're the only person who's finding it difficult, the only person who's struggling with it. And if you're not speaking to other people on your course, you'll never discover that actually everyone is finding this part really hard. Everyone is struggling to get over this hurdle. And I think that that's a really important thing, even just to have a bunch of people to sit around with and have a moan about how hard it is, can then sort of give you then the step to go and fix it afterwards, and the support before you can to help you move on. So I think speaking to your classmates, so don't, clubs and societies are great, and you can make lots of friends through that, but don't just rely on that. Do try and meet people on your course as well and speak to them.
Yeah.
Just specifically from an international student perspective as well, the short answer to your question is yes, it's okay to feel discouraged. We all feel that way, and there are specific challenges when you're coming in to study in an academic tradition that's different from the one you started out in. I know that when I was studying internationally, the thing that really helped in the first instance was getting my international student community. And that was really where my language skills went up, where my confidence went up, and then I branched out from there. So it's entirely normal to feel a bit discouraged. It's also entirely normal to lean on the people around you.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. Yeah, so again, don't suffer in silence. Make sure that you tell someone and you speak up, and yeah, but yeah, it's okay to feel this, absolutely. For registration, again, this is something we can't really help with, but the best link here, again, we've put it on the Moodle already. It's in the FAQs. There is a link to the offer holders page, which has more advice about registration and enrollment. So go to the FAQs, scroll right to the bottom of the FAQs on Moodle, and we've got a link there to the offer holders webpage, and that has more advice about registration and enrollment and when you're likely to receive that communication. Unfortunately, it's just something we don't know. It's not something we work with, I'm afraid. I don't know the answer to this one. I'm an international student. May I ask if family members have the opportunity to visit the school? What procedures do I go through? But unless anyone knows the answer off the top of their heads, this is something we could definitely look up and respond to via the forum and provide some more information there if it's something we might have to do a bit of research into. But we can absolutely do that. And I think just in the interest of time here, we're kind of at the point where what I was going to suggest to the panel that rather than, because we've got quite a lot of questions here and it does take a bit of time to get through them. So I think what we'll maybe suggest we'll do is, as a panel, myself and the other INT advisors, and with input obviously from the rest of our SLD panel here, we'll go through the rest of the questions that people have asked on Mentimeter, and we'll sort of pull out the key questions and the key topics, and then what we'll do is we'll respond via the Q&A forum, and hopefully that'll also encourage you to not be the first person posting on the Q&A forum, so we can post some of our responses there and some of the key links that we've perhaps talked about as well during some of our answers. But there was a question that was coming up that, just because we have our maths advisor Jenny here, that I think maybe be worth engaging with. So Jenny, you said there was a question around the kind of math support available, so if you maybe want to just speak briefly to that as our kind of last response to a question before we finish up and round up that way.
Yeah, so there was someone posted about being a social sciences student who was needing to use some maths but not really feeling that confident about it. And that's basically exactly what we're here for, the maths and stats team. So we have one-to-one appointments that you can book, where you can come along, bring whatever it is that you're struggling with, and one of our advisors will sit down, help you with it, work out, you know, where is the problem, and help you with find some resources to improve. We have drop-ins every week as well. So, you know, if you don't want to make a one-to-one appointment, but you want to come along to the drop-in, that's also absolutely fine. And then we also have some open classes as well. So this semester we're going to be running some maths refresher courses that you can come along to. And then we also have things like courses helping you to prepare for the numerical reasoning tests that employers when you're applying for jobs afterwards. So basically, we've talked a lot about the academic English and writing, but there's also maths and stats support here as well. So don't forget about that if you're having trouble, and come along early. So don't leave it until you get just to the exam. Come as soon as you're having any concerns about anything on your course, and we can help get you sorted.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. So just in the interest of time, as I said, I think we'll just finish up there, but don't worry if you've asked a question and you're either watching this recording at a future date or you're watching along here live. What we'll do is we'll go through, when we get a chance, we'll go through all of these questions and we'll pull out the kind of key topics, the key things that people have asked, and we'll post some responses in the Q&A forum. Again, just as soon as we're able to do, we will do that. Again, we're running the program all through this week, so please do bear with us. If you get in touch with us either via email or you post any questions on the Q&A forum, we will respond to you just as soon as we can, and we will also put up the recordings just as soon as as we can for those of you here live. So at this point, I would like to just say thank you very much to our fantastic panel. Thank you for taking time out of your day to come and answer questions with us here. For all of you watching along live and watching along later with the recording, I do hope that these answers have been useful to you. And once more, we'll do our best to answer the rest of the questions that we haven't gone to yet. So last thing just before we go then is just to flag up where we are for tomorrow's session. So just remember that now this is us basically the end of the first day of Transitions to Glasgow Postgraduate Edition. So I hope that the first day has been useful and it's set up the programme the way that we intended. And the next session will be in 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, and it's in UK time. And this is where we'll be going through assessment and feedback in your college, specific to your college. So again, to make sure you get to the right session, if you go to the course Moodle and go to the Choose Your College section. If you're not sure what college you're in, there's a link there for you to find your subject amongst a list of all of the subjects, and it tells you which college they sit under. So make sure you do that and find your course there, and that will tell you which college you're in. Please ignore the time on that slide. I've noticed I forgot to update this, the time on the slide. Look at the time at the bottom, which is 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. So that's when the next session will be. So once again, thank you very much for everyone attending. Thank you very much to our fantastic panel, and we will see you all tomorrow. Thank you very much.